Yeah.
Now we're live.
We're live now.
We're live now. Well, welcome everyone to this, the fourth of our core range and food pairing tastings. Peter and I are going to be talking you through the whiskies and a little bit about the chocolate as well. As you probably noticed, we're not in the same room. We're other ends of the country, but hopefully you'll be able to hear us without too many technical issues. For those of you who aren't aware, we'll go through a little bit of background about Kilchoman, and as I'm sure there's some people that haven't really heard of us a huge amount. So Kilchoman is a relatively new farm-based distillery on the island of Islay. Family run by Peter and I are brothers, and it's run by our parents, and was founded by our father back in 2005. And the whole sort of behind the distillery is to take whiskey making back to the traditional roots. So we are located on a working farm, Rockside Farm on Islay on the west coast of Scotland. And we are small scale producers. We produce just over 300,000 litres of alcohol. And this may sound like quite a lot to a lot of people, but if you put that into a scale of whiskey production in Scotland, we are right down at the bottom as far as scale and size. Other producers on Islay are producing over 1 million litres, and Kalila being the largest, producing in the region of 6 million litres of alcohol. So small scale production on the farm. And one of the whiskies we're going to be tasting this evening is made from barley that we've not only grown ourselves on the farm, but then we've malted, distilled, matured and bottled on site, which is very, very unique and something that as a distillery we're very, very proud of. And the way this evening is going to work is Peter and I are going to talk you through our core range of products. So you should have received, those of you who've got the pack, a little tasting pack like this with a glass and 4 sample bottles in there. We'll be starting with the Macabe, and then we're going on to the Saneg, the Loch, 100% Islay, and then finishing up with the Loch Gorm. If you have got any questions, do ask them, and Peter and I will do our best to answer them as well as we possibly can. So yeah, sit back, relax, and if you haven't got one of the packs, pour yourself a dram of Kilchoman, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit. If not, be slightly entertained. So I'll now pass it over to Peter, he's going to tell you all his knowledge of chocolate. He's been researching all day, so hopefully this will be impressive.
I thought you were going to introduce me a little bit earlier than this, so I didn't have to sit here in silence for 3 minutes while you rushed on for a while. But yeah, so as George said, the tasting this evening is whiskey focused. Obviously, Kilchoman and the 4 drams we've got for you, where you will be tasting through, and that'll be the focus. But we have over the last, I think, 3 tastings we've done like this, it's been all about food, and particularly Scottish-based companies where we've done halibut, Highland venison, and what was the other one, George? Something else.
Halibut? No.
Yeah, halibut, venison.
You mentioned the halibut?
We've got one. Oh, cheese. Island mold cheese. So we did those 3, and now we've got chocolate, and it's Coco, a company in Edinburgh, where we've got the chocolate from. Thank you to them for doing the pack that they did of 4 different chocolates that we're pairing with the whiskies, and they put a little discount, I think 10% discount for the pack, which runs till Sunday, I think, or certainly over the weekend. So if you enjoy the chocolate, you can go and get some more. But what they do really is they work with Colombian farmers. So it is a bit of an international feel to this rather than just Scottish, but they work closely with Colombian farmers, and they have visited over there. I believe they work very closely to source the best quality they can to then process into chocolate in Colombia and keep the jobs over there, before then bringing the chocolate over to Scotland, where they have their own chocolatiers here, where they sort of Scottish-fy it effectively and add a bit of Isle of Skye sea salt, haggis, and various other things that have been added to the chocolate over here to give it a little twist. So we'll be going through a few of those this evening, and we think they pair pretty well with the whiskey. So hopefully you think the same. Over to you, George. I think George is going to go through Macabe is the first whiskey we've got tonight, and yeah, George will give you a bit of knowledge.
Yeah, so in the pack, if you just Macabe, for those of you who aren't aware, this is our one of our core expressions. We launched this one back in 2012. So to give you a little bit of history about the distillery, as I said, founded in 2005. very small scale production, and the whole sort of style that we're trying to produce is a typical Islay with the nice peaty aromas, but also a relatively light, sweet floral spirit. And this combination and filling into quality casks meant that we've been able to release whiskey at a relatively young age. So we've been releasing whiskey since 2009 as a 3-year-old. And from 2009 to 2012, we had a range of small batch releases called Spring, Summer, Winter 2009, 10, and 11. And these were the foundations of Kilchoman before we then were in a position where we could release a core product that was always available around the world. And that is our Macabe, for those of you who aren't aware of the bottle itself. This is made from what we call commercial malt that we buy in from Port Ellen Maltings on Islay. And it's been matured in a combination of casks. So 90% matured in ex-bourbon casks and 10% in ex-Oloroso sherry casks. And what you've got there on the nose, you've got that lovely typical Islay peaty aromas, but there's also a lovely freshness to it. And that is Kilchoman signature. And relatively light in color with the bourbon cask, but when you taste it, you do get that little bit of peat up front, but you've got this lovely fresh sweetness to it as well. And we've actually paired this, this is when I probably got it wrong, but we paired this with our sea salt and lime, the sea salt and lime chocolate with the Islay Sky sea salt in there. And for me, this is where I really get into my own.
Stuff that in, George, get it in there.
And what you'll notice with the chocolate, you've got that lovely little bit of fresh lemon in there, lime, sorry. And it balances nicely with the freshness of the Macabe, and also the sweetness coming through from the milk chocolate as well. Really does work well together. And it's been great working with these, with cocoa and also with the cheese and fish, to show that whiskey and food do work very, very well together. And I think this combines beautifully.
Yeah, I would say go with the whiskey first. So have a dram of the whiskey and get a feel for the taste and the flavors that come through there with the Macabe. As George mentioned, you're getting a lot of citrus, fresh fruits, a little bit of vanilla, because this is 90% ex-bourbon barrels and only 10% sherry. So mostly that ex-bourbon barrel influence coming through with the vanilla, and then that sort of fresh, salty sort of smoke coming in. And then so you get familiar with the whiskey, and then the chocolate here really works well with that. You can coat your tongue with the chocolate and then have the whiskey, and that real lime finish on the chocolate is great with this whiskey. So this really does pair well. And I would say also with the questions, I see there's some comments coming in, so feel free to throw any questions our way. If you want to comment in the feed, we'll hopefully see them. I see the people in from Canada and Germany and further afield as well, in the UK, of course. So feel free to fire some questions and we'll see if we can answer them. But yeah, so the Macabe, on you go. On you go. Sorry, I wouldn't want to interrupt. I've been told to do that.
We'll try and stop talking over each other. The Macabe is bottled at 46%, natural color, non-chill filtered, and as a flagship whiskey, this has to be one of the best, as this has been going since 2012. And when we first launched it, the idea was to slowly increase the age, but as things have gone as far as sales and production levels, we've kept the age relatively the same, sort of roughly 5 years of age. But even at that age, with the quality cask that we get from the bourbon cask from Buffalo Trace and the sherry cask from Miguel Martin, you really do get a lot of flavor for a relatively young whiskey. And it really does. It's got a lovely, long, fresh finish to it. And it shows the sort of quality of the spirit that the guys in the Stillhouse have managed to produce. And one of the ex-stillmen is actually watching. Michael is watching, and he's mentioning every single stillman that ever worked at Kilchoman. So it's nice. Yeah, the guys in the Stillhouse do work exceptionally hard. It's their hard work that gets this quality of spirit. But no, works very well together.
And as George mentioned, Macabe is non-chill filtered natural color, but so are all the whiskies. So as you see them in the bottle, in the glass. That's all down to the wood. So a big thing our dad preaches constantly is wood and cask management, quality of the cask, and that shows in the colour and character coming through in the whiskey. So it's clear as water when it goes in to the cask, and then in just a short space of time, you can see how much colour is coming in. Not just Macabe, but when we move on to the Sanaig in particular, that real dark, rich colour coming in, completely down to what the wood and the cask has done. And it's so important to Kilchoman that we can show the natural colour, but also non-chill filtering it. So we're not changing or altering the whiskey in any way when it comes out that cask. It's as natural as it can be, really. And not every distillery does that. A lot of distilleries like to colour the whiskey or chill filter it to make sure it looks the same over the years, or batch to batch. There's no big changes. But for us, batch to batch whiskies, we think is part of the fun of whiskey. Part of the interest is knowing that Macabe, although it is our main release, it is going to be, well, it has been released since 2012, will be released every year going forward. There's lots of different batches. On the back of the bottles are printed the date of bottling and the year and month batch number. So you will notice year on year, Macabe will change batch to batch because it's fairly small batches we do as well. We don't do, 200, 300 cask battings where you can get fairly consistent. Our battings are sometimes only 30 or 60 casks, where you are going to get variations. Although always 90% bourbon barrels, 10% sherry from Macabe, there'll always be a little bit of variation, but hopefully that's part of the fun.
And questions have come in here saying, which has actually prompted us to not forget to talk about something, which is asking how the Macabe compares to the cask strength that we released recently.
There we go.
How professional we are.
There we go.
Yeah, this is something that we've launched worldwide in the last few weeks, really. And as far as makeup of casks and style, it is exactly the same makeup of casks as far as 90% bourbon, 10% Oloroso sherry, but the Macabe cask strength is a cask strength, and it features on the label some of our sheep with some Christmas hats on it. And I believe that it's 50. Is it 56.9? I haven't got a bottle in front of me.
Not even close. 58.6.
I got one of the numbers right, two of the numbers right. But no, what you get at cask strength is you get a real feel for the whole style of whiskey. You get that real big punch of the fruitiness to it.
I'll have a taste.
You have some, Pete. You enjoy. And it really does show off the style of whiskey that we produce at its best. And the cask strength Macabe is something that we've done before. We've done various different tours in Europe. We did one in America, and there was one in Asia as well. And we did a cask strength Macabe for that, and it's always been extremely popular. So it's nice to be able to do something at the back end of what's been a pretty rubbish year to try and to lift people's spirits with the cask strength Macabe.
Yeah, I would say the cask strength Macabe, to Brian, who was asking about the taste difference. I think whereas the regular Macabe at 46%, it's just got that smoothness to it. It's subtle peat, it's fresh citrus, and a sort of real good balance of all those characters, and a nice finish, but it's a nice medium length finish. Whereas with the cask strength Macabe, you perhaps on the nose don't notice too much difference. The high strength is sort of closing a little bit, but on the palate with the cask strength is where you get the real benefit. So the Macabe cask strength comes in actually not too powerful at the front end, but at the back of the palate is where that cask strength really opens up. It's got that extra power, that real smoke comes in, and actually sweetness I find with the Macabe cask strength, particularly on the finish, a real long, clean, but sort of sweet, smoky finish. So I'd say that's where the possible difference is, where with the Macabe, it's just that little bit subtler, the citrus comes through maybe a little bit more, but not quite the same finish on those ones. And I think someone was asking about future tastings. We will continue to do these tastings. No other food one planned at the moment, but we are doing a Christmas one. So I think on the 29th or the 30th of December, we'll be doing a tasting where it will be Macabe and Sanaig again, but we'll be doing a special few whiskies where it'll be the club release we did this year, where we've got a Kilchoman club, which we do a release for every year for those members of the club. And then we'll also do a single cask release that we've got on our website, which is a Pedro Jimenez single cask at cask strength. So a couple of different sort of special whiskies there.
One of the questions just come in there was asking about our filling strength. And yeah, we all our casks are filled at 63.5%. That is the strength that we fill our casks, and then they'll reduce down naturally through time, but also then we reduce them down for bottling strength, mainly 46, but the 100% Islay tends to be slightly higher at 50% alcohol that we fill at. The bottles, that is. And I think now Peter's gonna talk about some.
We'll move on to the Sannig and the Macabe and Sannig, these two whiskies here. So they're really good to try side by side like this in a tasting, because effectively they're the same whiskey right up to the cask. So we've used the same malt, so it's 50 ppm malt. So the phenol level, the smoke level effectively of the malt, the barley we've used is at 50, which is pretty high, similar to other big peated Islay whiskies like Ardbeg, Lafroig, Lagavulin. We've then put that through the distillation process, the fermentation, and it's all the same cut points we've used right up to filling strength. So no difference when it goes into the barrel, both also similar age. But one thing, if you've got the carton, you have bought the full bottle, is on the front there, you'll see the cask influence bar graph, and that shows how much sherry and bourbon influence is in on each. So Macabe had 90% bourbon, 10% sherry. The Sannig release, this one here, has slightly different variations. It's almost the opposite, really. It's 70% of the influence is coming in from the sherry casks, and 30% of the influence is coming in from the bourbon barrels. So you've sort of switched it up, and you can see the colour difference here compared to the Macabe. Not that Macabe is particularly light, but the Sannig is just so dark because of the really active sherry cask we've used. Sherry ex-sherry casks would always bring a darker, richer colour, but this Sannig in particular has that real dark, rich feel to it. And we get all our casks, sherry, Oloroso sherry anyway, from Miguel Martin in Spain, and all our bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace in America. And we really try and source the best quality wood we can, because it's so important. We get the high quality ex-bourbon barrels from Buffalo Trace. And with the sherry cask, we're not looking for seasoned sherry where it's just sherry that's been put in. It might be used for vinegar or whatever afterwards, or dumped down the drain, and it's just for selling to Scotch whisky industries, which has happened to it recently with the boom in Scotch whisky, but not so in sherry. Although there's some great sherry producers out there, and it is hopefully coming back and on the rise. It's harder to get hold of sherry casks, so we try and get the aged, mature sherry cask that has that real sort of influence in the wood that can then impart it into the whiskey, and that's what you're seeing here. And again, we're not pretending this is a 20, 30-year-old whiskey. It's a relatively young release, but you can see the colour and the character that's come in there in a short space of time. And it's the same strength, so 46% bottling strength, non-chill filter, natural colour. Again, so much similarities, but you put the nose to this whiskey, and you can see how different it is Macabe. I'm sure probably not many of you have got many Macabe left, but if you do, you can nose that glass if you have it left, or if you're using the same one. Bad luck. But yeah, you'll see the difference there with that sort of rich, dark, sort of cooked fruit feel coming through on the Sannig, whereas Macabe was all about those fresh citrus notes. You are getting some of that because it is still 30% of that influence still coming from bourbon, but it's really that dark, rich feel to it. Sort of more of a barbecue-y smoke and barbecue peat coming through, rather than that salty sort of fresh smoke as well.
One question that's just come in about Sannig, Pete.
Yeah.
Someone noticed that the Sannig has got darker lately. Do you feel the taste has shifted with the colour?
Yeah, I think so. Not as much as the colour. So the colour went from a mid-dark level. So it went from being a dark sherry, sort of a little bit darker than Macabe, to what is now really dark and rich colour for a youngish whiskey. So it has changed dramatically, the colour, but the taste is still similar. It's still very similar, just a subtle difference. I'd say there's a bit more of that cooked fruit sort of feel coming through on this Sannig than there was in maybe batch 2018 or start of 2019. So certainly a subtle change, but not as much as the colour.
always I find with the Sani, got that lovely little bit of weight on the palate. A little bit, definitely after drinking the Macabe, going on to the Sani, get a little bit more weight on the palate coming through from those larger, bigger flavors coming through from the sherry casks. There was another question there that was about the Macabe from Michael Barford, one of the ex-Stillman, obviously wanting some information about us. No, he was asking about the average age for the Macabe, and actually at the moment we've kept the average age the same for the last few years. Now we've increased production. We hope to be able to move that up in the future at some point, but at the moment it's staying the same.
Yeah. So the idea is always that we'll increase the age as we go forward for our core range. Macabe and Stanig will slowly edge up over the years, but we've sold a bit more whiskey than we actually planned to, and so we didn't have the stocks in the warehouse. But that is the plan going forward next year and beyond, is to slowly increase the age of Macabe and Stanig. So they'll go up towards 8, 9, 10, and wherever we think it works best. At the moment, we think those whiskies will be best somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, but we're not exactly sure. So they'll just keep edging up. Again, they'll keep changing slightly batch to batch, but we want to keep the taste profile pretty similar. And just on the chocolate as well. So with this one, we're going to be tasting the haggis dark chocolate. And this is one of my favorite chocolates. And it works well with the Sani because, as I mentioned, you're getting that sort of barbecue smoke, sort of more cooked fruit, and some get a sort of smoked bacon feel through on the whiskey as well. And that works with the haggis chocolate, where it's a richer, obviously, chocolate being used, dark chocolate, but it's also got that meaty sort of aftertaste to the chocolate, and that works well with the sherry or also sherry influence of the whiskey. So again, try the whiskey first and get comfortable with that, and then add the chocolate, and it's a great balance of the two. Again, the chocolate's just phenomenal as well on its own, so you've got plenty to go through. I think it's a pretty big bar.
The what I find with the balance of the two flavors there, you've got the sort of, with the influence of the sherry cask and the Sani, you've got more of a viscous, like sort of heavier, chewy style of whiskey. And then when you add the chocolate as well, you've got a little bit of pepper spice coming out of the whiskey. And then on the finish of the chocolate, you add, it complements with the haggis spice as well. A real big mouthfeel. Whereas the influence of the bourbon on the Macabe, it's less weighty and more sort of fresh and zesty. And then you move into the sherry influence, Kilchoman's, much more of a mouthfeel, slightly more horizontal flavor profile. And you really do get bit more oil on the inside of your cheeks.
Oh, very, very professional there, George. You almost sound like you know what you're talking about.
Well, occasionally.
You have to be practicing.
Yeah, I was in front of the mirror all day. It's all I've done. Just reciting my notes. Yeah.
No, but it is great. So hopefully everyone at home, if you do have these whiskies or different ones, the Macabe and Sani side by side like this, it's really great to see the difference in how important cask is. Obviously, we talk about cask a lot, and that is important. It's not to take away from what we've done with the spirit, with the farm. George will touch on in a minute, I think, as we go forward. But with the farm, we're experimenting with barley types. In the fermentation, we're experimenting with the yeast types we use to get through different flavors. In the stills, it's obviously vitally important, the cut points and everything. So there's no doubt the spirit is vital and the quality of spirit you can produce. But it's just making the point that casks are also, as my dad would put it, and he'll bore you for hours if you ever get him on the subject. So try to avoid that if you can. But he says casks are king. And it's down to that you've got to have the best spirit possible, but you also have to have the best cask, because you can make the best spirit in the world, but you dump it into an average cask, you're likely 5, 10, 20 years later going to get an average whiskey and ruin what you made at the start. So that's why we're sort of labouring the point on the cask.
And also because we're relatively young, we're 15 years old next month, we don't have that huge age variant that we can sit here and talk about our 10, 12, 20, 30, 40-year-old whiskey. So we always look at the influence that the cask can give you. And it's something that in recent months mainly, our father's been experimenting a little bit more with different cask types. And it is interesting, especially when you get to taste them side by side like that, with similar spirit, similar age, just different cask types that they've been matured in. So
there's a question here, George, to move you on to the 100% Islay quite well, about the 100% Islay bottlings being all bourbon barrels, but the 8th and now the 10th that was just released being having sherry casks in them, and why that was?
So it was the bourbon with the 100% Islay always paired very, very well in the early years when we had that slightly younger style of spirit and the freshness of the 100% Islay, which is a lighter peating level, and it always balanced very, very nicely. And it's always nice to change things up slightly. And we'd always filled a few sherry casks with the 100% Islay spirit, put them into the warehouse, and then it was only really when they came of age and there was the right balance of flavors. So the 9th edition, which is in the packs, which you've got there, that is all bourbon casks. But the 10th edition that we released last month had some sherry casks in it, and it's the influence of sherry just adds a little bit more richness. Whereas personally, I'm going to put my head on the block here and say I almost prefer it 100% Islay in the bourbon casks.
Yeah, I think the short answer is because we felt like it at the time. Really, basically, we had some sherry casks in the warehouse and we hadn't released them yet as a combination. We thought, why not, really? And there's been a real mixed reception because you may be asking Ralph, who's asked that question, maybe asking because they prefer the bourbon barrels, and lots of people did say, "Oh, why did you change it? The bourbon was great. That real fresh, sweet sort of vanilla bourbon character came through." But then others loved the sherry influence on the 100% Islay, which is lighter in peating level. So it was sort of something we did as an experiment to see how it went, and we did it a few times. And in the future, who knows? We may well mix them together again. We may do 2 separate releases, or one fully sherried, one bourbon. So the short answer to that is sort of we do various things, and there'll be lots of different things coming out in the future, different peating levels and all sorts.
Yeah, that was the short answer, which turned into the long answer as well. But remember the casks were there. In all honesty, we probably forgot they were there because only recently that we've put a system in, which meant that we can scan casks, and we've got a system on the computer which will tell us exactly what casks we got in the warehouse. But the 9th edition, which you've got in the packs, this was all ex-bourbon casks, filled in 2008 and 2010. These bourbon casks were made from barley that we grew on the farm at the distillery. So Kilhoma Distillery is our Rockside farm, and there we grow just over 200 tons of malting barley. And the barley used in the 9th edition of 100% Islay is all publican barley. And barley varieties is something that we've experimented with slightly more in recent years, as well as yeast varieties, which Peter's touched on. But the 100% Islay is a very, very unique whiskey as far as not only do we grow the barley, we get to decide every part of the process from when it's sown to when it's harvested in our Kilhoma combine harvester, which even our dad was trusted to drive this year, which is slightly worrying. But grow it on the farm, then malt it, traditional floor maltings before distilling, maturing and bottling all on site. Unique within the whiskey industry in Scotland, and something that we're very, very proud of. And you do get this very, very unique style of flavour. Lighter peating level, so whereas what we class as commercial malts in the first 2 was up at 50 ppm, what we've got in the 100% Islay is down in the region of 20 parts per million. And you do just get this lovely freshness to the nose, and that lovely little bit of sweetness coming off. And these ex-bourbon casks, majority of them were fresh casks. Majority of these were fresh casks straight from Buffalo Trace. A few of them were refills. So we use a combination of fresh and refills. And that's where you're just trying to balance the flavors and balance the influence from Kilhoma and the cask type. And it's also bottled at 50% alcohol, so slightly higher in ABV. So you might get a little bit of alcohol on the front of the palate, but then you get the lovely, sweet, sort of malty aromas coming in behind it.
Yeah, it's I think the peating level and the strength of those 2 main differences, and they're so evident on the whiskey there. That extra 50% just gives it a bit more bite, a bit more kick, and that lighter peating level on the palate, it's so much sort of I think maltier, as you mentioned, George, malty sweetness to it coming through, and still fresh and citrus, but it's that malty sweetness, I think malty sweetness that is the big one.
Yeah, for me, and especially the nose, it's so floral, the nose, and it's got this lovely sort of fresh grassy notes coming off as well. And barley variety. So this is all publican barley that was that we harvested, as I said, in 2007, 2009. And this year we grew, I've forgotten now, Sassy and
Concerto.
Lucky
I'm here now.
Yeah, lucky you are. So good. That was obviously what you were swatting up on. So, yeah, we've experimented with barley varieties, and the interesting thing about growing barley on Islay is not the easiest thing to do. I'm not going to pretend.
Sassy was last year. We grew Diablo this year.
Diablo.
Yeah, we were close. We both got it slightly wrong.
Oh well, never mind. I've forgotten what I was going to say now.
Probably wasn't that important anyway. But anyway, with the whiskey, if you're tracing this and thinking 50% alcohol is quite high, I know some people maybe used to drinking whiskey at 40, 42, 43%. So at 50% alcohol may seem high, but actually, once you get this on the palate, it doesn't blow you away. It's not sort of burning your throat with alcohol and covering the taste. It really is powerful, but it's powerful with character and taste and flavor. So it's not like the strength overwhelms it. You actually don't get that alcohol burn, which is we're hugely proud of in all our whiskies. Really, it's not the alcohol fighting the flavor. It's got that depth of character to it, which is great. I think George touched on it there, where our father's idea was to do a farm distillery from start to finish, from barley to bottle, and we are the only ones to do it this way. And it's a lot harder. There's been a hell of a lot of challenges along the way to growing the barley, all different types, to floor malting it by hand. Guys do 4 tons batches, raking and turning it by hand for almost a week at a time, which isn't much fun. We did it back in the day when I don't think our dad paid us very much, more like slave labor back in the day when we were shoved into the malt floor to do our work. But it's that hard work, and then going all the way through the process right up to bottling, and everything that goes out from the distillery. I see there's people here from America, Canada, Germany, probably further afield. And wherever it goes around the world, it all comes bottled on Islay and leaves from there, which we're so proud to be able to do.
And someone asked if we ourselves and Brewer Gladdy are the only ones to bottle on Islay. Yeah, at the moment, we're the only ones to bottle on Islay, which is brilliant. And actually being able to, during these tough times that we've had in recent months, over like everyone has had, being able to bottle our own whiskey during COVID has meant that we've been able to keeping you all supplied with Kilchoman around the world, which has been brilliant for us and something that has been hugely beneficial to be able to keep going as much as possible. We probably should talk about the chocolate though.
Oh yes.
So with the 100% Islay, we've paired this with the salted caramel and milk chocolate, and what I love about this is I love chocolate for one.
Just finish your mouthful first.
Okay, Mum. But the sweetness and the bourbon cask influence that comes off with on the 100% Islay balances nicely with the caramel, salted caramel in there. But also the chocolate's not too heavy. it's light and very, very milky, so it balances nicely. Whereas if you wanted to go with the dark chocolate, I feel the dark chocolate would slightly overpower the light, fresh note that you've got in the 100% Islay. It is on the slightly sweeter side, but I think that the 100% Islay's got that little bit more sweetness coming through, and it does work really nicely there.
I think that's the thing. This chocolate does work great. It's that slight saltiness. Again, you get a salty smoke, that sort of saltiness to the whiskey. The sweetness, I'd say the chocolate is probably, as George read, a little bit too sweet perhaps with the 100% Islay, but it still does work. It still does give those similar characters coming through. And someone was asking there about bourbon barrels, and do we only use Buffalo Trace? Yep, we do only use Buffalo Trace. I think a few snuck through the cracks early on. We used a few from Speyside Cooperage as a second fill cast early on, but after those first little period, I think 6 months a year, we then moved to solely Buffalo Trace. So to give us that real consistency year on year, batch on batch of casks and the quality we have.
And all our casks that we get delivered to the distillery, they arrive whole, so fully made up, shipped from America or from Spain to the distillery. And what that gives you is the cask is whole. So the staves are all drenched with whether it's bourbon, sherry, any wine or fortified wines, that cask that we've used. And that really does give you a little sort of leg up with those early months of maturation. Yes, it does mean that we're shipping a lot of air from whether it's America or Spain, but it really does benefit, especially when you're filling into port or Madeira casks that we've done in the past, and that you really do get that big hit of the influence in the early months as well. But no, the casks that we use from Buffalo Trace are always brilliantly consistent.
Yeah, and using them, each distillery can use them as many times as they want. Some 4, 5, 6 times they'll refill those casks. But the whiskey Kilhoman want to create, what we want to create, is something young, fresh, full of character, vibrant, and that's hopefully what you're getting in these whiskies you're tasting this evening, is that fresh, full of character, vibrancy in the drams. And that comes from us only using fresh. The first fill, as George mentioned, just shipped straight over, filled up straight away as a fresh wet cask. And then we only really use those once more. So once they're emptied, we fill them up once more, mature them, and then we sell them on to whoever wants them. I think we sold them on to beer companies, gin companies, other whiskey distilleries to mature their spirit in. So we want that young, fresh character. It does mean that we're not going to have too many sort of 20, 30, 40-year-old Kilhomans, because you then do need to mature them in slightly less active casks. But we're not too bothered about the age or too bothered about having these really old, expensive additions. What we want is to be a different style of whiskey, which is that, as I said, young, fresh, full of character. And hopefully you're all getting that coming through on the drams. I see some tasting notes about foam, banana, and creaminess for the 100% Islay, and that's exactly what we get coming through on here as well.
Yeah, I mean, the 100% Islay has always got a special spot, place in our hearts, as far as, when we started the distillery. As Peter mentioned, we were chucked onto the malt floor and told that we had to turn barley, and it wasn't something that we'd ever done before. So Eddie Macabe from Bowmore came and helped us out and told us what we were doing wrong. We weren't doing much right, and we soon got that right. So we've seen the whole process, and it's something that's always nice to be involved in. And for someone asked if the birds are still eating the barley, yes, the birds are still getting into the malt floor. It doesn't matter what we put on the windows. They sneak in as soon as the doors open. Anyone who's been to the distillery before, there's normally birds tweeting away in the still house, as well as flying around the malt floor as well. The joys of being on a working farm, I suppose.
Yeah. And someone's asking there about the pairing tonight, and it's safe to say George worked his way through several bars of chocolate before he decided on these 4 to choose from. But also we do have a good idea. It tends to be the sherry cask do mix better with obviously a darker fruit. The sherry cask worked the darker chocolate, that richer feel to it, and the 100% Islay we knew was going to be that sweeter side, that sort of salty smoke. Macabe, we knew it had that citrus. So we had a pretty good idea of what chocolates may work before we got them, but fortunately George was more than happy to narrow it down for us. And
you're actually lying there, Pete, because my chocolate arrived at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and if we looked at my bars of chocolate, which are pretty much full, I think yours are not much left.
Just got a couple of bits.
Couple of bits left. What we forgot to mention about the chocolate as well, which I think all the packaging is, they collaborate with contemporary artists. So everyone, you might, even though you've got this is the Colombian dark chocolate, your packaging might be slightly different. So they sort of collaborate with these artists around the world to come up with the packaging. And actually, when we did one of the tours in Europe, we did chocolate.
Yeah, so I think it was, I can't remember if it was these exact ones, but yeah, it was the same company, Coco Chocolate, that we took around the tour, and that soon disappeared at most of the whiskey tastings we did. So we're doing, if you do have the chocolate, we're doing the lime and Isle of Skye sea salt and the haggis dark chocolate we're doing with Macabe and Stanag. We're going to package them up with the Macabe and Stanag actual labelling and sell them as a bit of a pack going forward as well. So if you like the chocolate and the pairing, then we should have that up fairly soon to have a go at. But we'll move on to the Loch Gorm and the final whiskey pairing of this evening. the Loch Gorm here, which is the 2020 edition, which is all sherry cask matured. So this has been sherry butts, whereas what we've tried before has been Oloroso hogsheads. So in the Saneg, where there was sherry and bourbon in the vatting there, a combination of 70% sherry, 30% bourbon. That was Oloroso sherry hogsheads. Now we're going into slightly different territory with the Loch Gorm, which is entirely sherry matured, so never touched a bourbon barrel, no influence from that, but also Oloroso sherry butts, which tends to be sort of 500 litre, but I say tends to be, it always is, a 500 litre cask, which is much bigger, hogshead smaller at 250 litres, and bourbon barrels even smaller at 200 litres. So we're getting bigger in casks here. And the reason for the bigger casks usually is because the sherry influence is quite a powerful, big flavour profile to come into a whiskey. And we found when we used the smaller hogsheads to fully mature our Loch Gorm, it was a lot of sherry influence, particularly up front. You got that sherry flavour, and it was a big, bold flavour, but it died away a little bit quick. And what we want with the whiskey is to not only get the flavour at the front, but to continue on to the back end and really have that sort of viscous, thick weight to the whiskey. And the butts provided that because they were slightly bigger. You got a slightly slower, more integrated maturation with the sherry and our spirit. And you always want that balance, which is easier to find with the bourbon barrels, where it's a lighter influence from the cask onto the spirit, so you can manage it a bit easier. Whereas with the sherry cask, because they're more powerful, you've got to be careful not to over mature it, because it's great releasing a sherried whiskey, but if all you can taste is ex-sherry cask, it can be from anywhere in Ireland, anywhere in Scotland, anywhere in the world. What's the point? So we wanted this to definitely be, and make sure you're tasting Kilchoman in sherry cask, not just a sherried whiskey. So that's what we get here. And again, on the nose, similar to the Saneg. But I think what's different here is that spicy sort of peppery feel you get to it. Oloroso sherry tends to be that sort of dry, rich sort of spiciness, pepper feel to it. Whereas sherry like Pedro Jimenez sherry that we use a lot is a more sweet, sort of intense sweetness to the flavour. Whereas this is that dry pepperiness you're getting on the nose, that rich feel. And on the palate, it's a similar story where you've really, especially from the 100% Islay, where it was that real light, malty sweetness, fresh, you've changed completely to that dark, rich, as I said, real viscous thickness to it. And back down to 46%, I will say, with this one as well. So 50% with 100% Islay, back down to 46% here. But for me, a great whiskey, but shows, again, how different the casks and how much of a role they play on any whiskey.
No, absolutely, and I think with the Loch Gorm, it's always one, whereas year on year, even though it's always sherry cask matured, I can remember back to the first one we ever released, first Loch Gorm, which I believe was just called sherry cask matured, which was all fresh, first fill Oloroso sherry butt. So it's this big, dark, almost like a sherry bomb. And then each year we've had to play with the levels of fresh and refill cask just to try and get the balance of flavors right. And Loch Gorm is always one of our most popular releases worldwide. Sherry cask matured whiskey is hugely popular, but at the same time, with the heavily peated barley we've got and the big Oloroso sherry flavors, you have to get the right combination of fresh casks that have coming straight from Spain, but also casks that we might have filled for our Macabe expression and then refilled, put back in the warehouse. So what happens then is you allow the whiskey matures slightly slower, and it takes slightly longer to take the influence from the wood. So you allow the whiskey the Kilchoman characteristics to come to the forefront without being sort of slightly drowned out. And it's always a bit of a juggling act.
Yeah. And there's a question about Loch Gorm being in the 20 CL bottles, and the real answer is we don't have enough. So 20 CL bottles, which George there has a little miniature version and very much a squashed down version of the big bottles. We only do those for Macabe and Saneg at the moment, our two core expressions. Very well done, George. Beautifully done. And realistically, those are the only two whiskies that are always available throughout the year. All the other whiskies, the 100% Islay, we do it in batches. This was the 9th edition you're tasting tonight. There's a 10th, 11th, 12th. So once each year. Loch Gorm is the same. This is the 2020 version we're tasting now. There'll be a 2021, but they're always released in small batches. The 100% Islay, 12,000 bottles roughly a year. the Loch Gorm, maybe 15 to 17,000 bottles, something like that every year. So small batches and unfortunately we simply don't have enough to put in 20 CLs and 70 CLs. That will hopefully change in the future. George mentioned we've increased production, and our dad's in his wildest dreams, I don't think when he built Kilhoman 15 years ago would be imagining we'd be doubling production and increasing what we do. He'd be thankful just to sell what we could, but we're fortunate position to the demand around the world is so high that we're doubling production, and hopefully whether it's 5-10 years down the road, we'll have a sort of bigger range of whiskies from Kilhoman that we can release all the time. Another question on Loch Gorm is that about it getting bigger and with flavour as you add water. And I think the water is a debate, throughout all people who drink whiskey, where adding water, do you, don't you? And I think we're of the opinion that whiskey welcomes water. Add as much as you want, as much or little. Some people love cask strength and don't want to touch it. Others want to water it right down. And I think that a good whiskey actually takes water. So if you've got a lot of flavour and depth of character in there, so hopefully Brian, who's commented there, the reason why you're getting Loch Gorm evolving and changing as you add water is because it's not just dying. When you add a drop of water, reducing the alcohol, the flavour isn't just disappearing, which you might get in some whiskies. But as you add water to Loch Gorm, it's great that you're getting more flavour, more complex, bigger character, because that means there's a lot of flavour in the whiskey, no matter without the alcohol or with it, which is great news.
I think also if you're trying a whiskey, it's always worth to try it without any water first, give you an idea of the whiskey, and then always just add a few drops and go from there. Quick question about the ppm of the Loch Gorm. ppm of the Loch Gorm is 50, same as the Sané and same as the Macabe. So commercial malt from Port Ellen Maltings, up at 50 ppm, and especially with those big Oloroso sherry casks, the get a little bit more smoke coming out. I always look at peat and smoke as different flavor profiles. Peat can be slightly more direct, whereas smoke a bit more of a mouthfeel. And I feel that the smoke comes out a bit more. I think Peter mentioned this, smoke meats barbecue style that I always get with a Loch Gorm. But now you're getting a lot more of the cooked fruits coming through as well, and that sort of rich dark fruits. Chocolate.
Onto the chocolate. So again, if you're familiar now with Loch Gorm and you have the nose, you've got the feel of the taste, we're on to the full dark chocolate now. And this is something, again, that hopefully works really well, where there's that real hit to the dark chocolate, that real rich, heavy sort of flavour to the chocolate. And then when you drink the Loch Gorm, that same viscous nature of the Loch Gorm whiskey just adds and combines really well together. I think this one works really well.
And especially there's not a huge amount of bitterness with the dark chocolate. A lot of people, especially myself, always think of dark chocolate being quite bitter. You've got a little bit of bitterness on the finish, but nothing overpowering. It works nicely with the Loch Gorm, and it's something that we've always done before. Bit of food pairings with Loch Gorm. I saw someone mentioned earlier on about 100%. No, sorry, Macabe and oysters. Macabe and oysters work wonderfully well as the 100% Islay and oysters. Those bourbon cask matured work and heavily peated lighter styles that we do work really, really well with seafood, especially. And it's great doing these because each of the 4 tastings we've done same whiskies and paired them up with different foods, from charcuterie to fish to cheese.
And all this time, well done.
And through to the chocolate, and it just shows that whiskey can be enjoyed with food, and it's always great to really explore that. And it's been the chocolate is delicious. I'll keep on eating.
I think that sort of is a good point to make as well about the chocolate. With Kilhoman's a big flavour, a big character whiskey. It's got a lot of power to it, and we needed chocolate that also had a lot of flavour to it. And the guys at Coco produced some brilliant chocolate with great flavours that do balance with the Kilhoman. If you did it with an ordinary run-of-the-mill milk chocolate, you would probably hardly taste the chocolate when you had the whiskey, and the whiskey would take over. So it's important to get the balance right with any food, whether it's cheese, as George mentioned, fish. You need that flavour in the food to bring out in the whiskey, because obviously wine and food has been done for years, but more and more now spirits, particularly whiskey, is being drunk, with food, with meals, because you can pair it with them. It does work, and hopefully we can share a bit of that with some of the Scottish producers around the country that we've teamed up with so far. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Coco doing their, I think, 10% off on their pack of the 4 whiskies, 4 chocolates. So if you wanted to sort of go and do this tasting after, if you didn't have the tasting pack, you didn't have the chocolate, feel free to jump on there and get that before Sunday. But
there is anything
to add?
There's a discount code that you need to put in, get the 10%.
That might help.
Kilhoman 10. So if you go on the Coco Chocolatier website based in Edinburgh, and Kilhoman 10, and you'll get 10% off the chocolates. But if you have problems with that, do send the distillery a message on any of our social media platforms, and someone will be able to help you and point you in the right direction, hopefully. But again, I was going to say with the Loch Gorm, it's being such a big style of whiskey. It's one that maybe the one that you sit and enjoy for a long period of time, as far as there's a lot of flavour in there. And we'll be releasing the next edition of the 100% Islay and the Loch Gorm in 2021. And again, it will be great over the next few months. We'll be getting ready to sample casks and pick the style of cask that we're going to use before we release them.
A question from Sarah there about food and whiskey tastings at the distillery. I think we're doing the chocolate at the distillery. I don't think we've got the venison and fish and other things, but we will be doing the chocolate and whiskey tastings at the distillery whenever it is people are allowed back over there, or when and how we're open. But we will be doing that, so you can have a taste of those there. And
if you to see what
George, I was mid-flow there, but you just interrupted. Carry on.
It's probably quite boring what you're going to say. I was just going to say that if anyone needs to know what the opening times or tours, etc., to get in touch with the distillery either through the website or on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and someone will be able to help you out with that.
Yeah, and if there's any questions we missed through today, just hopefully leave your comments there, and Catherine or someone at the distillery will be able to get back to you on the feed. This has been our core range whiskies, so we do have other whiskies outside of this, whether it's single casks or limited, things like a port cask matured or a Madeira, STR, these different cask types that we've done very small batches of. So we have done lots of releases outside this, but the whiskies tonight, the Macabe, Sanay, 100% Islay, Loch Gorm are our sort of core main whiskies. And then we like to do a lot of experimenting outside of that, whether it be barley varieties. Now we're putting on the label of all our whiskies now the barley varieties, whether it's Optic, Publican, Concerto. The yeast types will start to be a thing we bring into it as well. So we love a bit of experimenting, and cask types is on top of that with all these different, particularly wine casks that we do outside of that. So if you ever need some information on our website, I think there's all the different limited releases we've done in the past. So you can have a look at them and see if any of them are still available. But thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. And as I said, we've got another one around Christmas time, which we'll hopefully have up in around a week or 10 days with a few special whiskies there, a few special drams. So cheers, George. Lovely spending time with you.
It's a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. I'll, we'll speak soon.
Yeah. Right. Cheers, everyone. Slán